Okay, we are at a minute past, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Buried Treasure or Risk, Governing Unstructured Data. We appreciate you joining us today, and the first thing I always like to do is just take a second to introduce our speakers. My name is Shayna Horka, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at Gimmal. And I'm joined by our key speaker today, Gimmal's Director of Sales Engineering, Dean Misenhimer. Now, before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go through. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to submit them in the Q&A section on your screen, and then we're going to answer as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. There will be at least one poll question that you'll see pop up on your screen, so please keep an eye out for that. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know so we can assist you. All right, so to kick things off, I just have one slide here to tell you a little bit about Gimmal and how we can help you take control of your information with our suite of solutions. Founded in 2002, Gimmal is a records, information management, and governance software company that helps you balance the value your information provides with the risk it also presents. Whether you're trying to discover information in unstructured data sources, quickly respond to data requests, or comply with policies across multiple sources, Gimmal can help you achieve your information governance goals. We have a client success team and a global network of partners that deliver solutions in conjunction with our key partners like Microsoft and SAP. Gimmal's family of software products work together to let you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive solutions include records management, content governance for SharePoint, document management for SAP solutions, and Altitude, a file analysis solution. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Dean so he can go ahead and get started with the presentation.
Thank you, Shayna. So good morning, afternoon, good day, wherever you may be. So let's start and talk a little bit about just what information governance is. I went out and I took a look for some good definitions, industry definitions, not just a Gimmal definition. And I found a couple of what I thought were really good ones. So Gartner Group, the industry analyst, defines information governance as the specification of decision rights and an accountability framework to ensure appropriate behavior in the valuation, creation, storage, use, archiving, and deletion of information. So pretty good definition. ARMA, the industry trade group, defines information governance as the overarching and coordinating strategy for all organizational information. It establishes the authorities, supports, processes, capabilities, structures, and infrastructure to enable information to be a useful asset and reduced liability to an organization. And that's really what this slide is all about. Information governance is about balancing the value and the risk of your information. You can't, err like any scale. You can't go too heavy one side or the other. If you err too heavily on mitigating risk and protecting against having risk, you run, quite frankly, the risk of locking things down so much and making things so difficult to use that your user adoption suffers. If I have to fill in 27 pieces of metadata every time I upload a document to the cloud, or it makes it so difficult for me to get to certain information, I constantly have to request access to information, user adoption goes down and users find ways, quite frankly, to circumvent the system. On the other side of it, if I err too much to making it easy to get information in and share information and information float everywhere, now I'm opening myself up to risk, right? And the liability that goes with that risk. So finding the right balance between controlling the risk, driving user adoption, and keeping the value of your information high is really what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day. And it's very much a balancing act that will be continual, quite frankly. I like this slide because I think it points out a specific problem. Right? Do you know where sensitive or private information exists in your organization? Think about your network, think about your company, think about the environment you work in. And I use this slide specifically because there's the saying, can you see the forest for the trees? Are you so wrapped up? Do you need to have to be so wrapped up in looking, in the details of everything to find information, to dig down deep into specific systems or file shares, or to do any type of analysis and look for stuff? You're so wrapped down into kind of one rat hole. Can you not see the big picture? And that's really what we need to be able to do, is to take a step back and get an overarching view of all of our enterprise information, because we do have a lot of systems out there where information is stored, and that's just life in today's world. And then there's what we call dark data, right? Data that you don't know is out there. How much dark data do you have, and how much of that dark data could be sensitive or private information? PII files, trade secrets, information that you may not want spread across your network. And the challenge is, yeah, I can look through things like SharePoint or file shares and do searches in this, but does that really give me visibility into things like desktop machines, right? How much information is in your download directory that you forgot was there? You're working on a document, it gets downloaded, you open it up, you work on it, you save it back to the cloud, you never delete the downloaded version, right? PST files, right? Corporations have been fighting the battle of eliminating PST files for a long time because those become users' personal document management systems. So how do I analyze all of my different data sources to find my buried treasure that's out there, the information that's of high value, or expose risk that may be out there? We're going to take a quick poll here now. And the poll question is very simple. Where is all of your information stored? You can choose more than one answer. Is it in SharePoint? Is it in Microsoft 365 or in SharePoint Online? Is it in file systems across the network? Is it stored in email? Is it out there in OneDrive locations? Is it in various ECM platforms like FileNet or Documenta, Box, or others that are out there, right? How many different places do you have information, or where could information be stored across your network? In the background, Shana and Indira are furiously tabulating your votes, and we'll put the results up here in real time. Oh, and somebody said it's only going to let you choose one. Oh, sorry about that. Then I would say choose the most prevalent one in your organization. What is kind of the go-to for most organizations? And we'll see kind of what the dominant one is for most organizations. So we're getting the votes tabulated, and here come the results. And wow, file systems. Probably the scariest one of the bunch, right? A lot of information in organizations is still stored on file shares. And they seem impossible to get rid of, right? So SharePoint was second, with other ECM repositories a close third. So pretty good distribution of information there. Thanks very much for that information. And I'm sure that's somebody mentioned in the chat. I'm sure that's evolving real time for a lot of companies, right? So, and I asked that question first before we get to this one, because the question really is, how many different data sources do you have across your network? When you look across your company, when you look across your network, and now the network isn't just what's inside your firewall. The network includes all of the cloud services that you use, whether that's Microsoft 365, Box, or other systems, right? Where's content at? Do you have content stored in SharePoint on-premise, in older SharePoint environments, in newer SharePoint environments? Is it in SharePoint Online or other services now that Microsoft 360 provides? Somebody mentioned Teams, right? Teams will create SharePoint sites. Are you even aware those are out there and have content in them? What about OneDrive? Exchange Online, right? Have you moved your email payload to the cloud, and now you have a lot of information stored in Exchange Online? Or do you still have Exchange on-prem or things like the PST files that I mentioned that are still out there? Network file shares, obviously, we know that everybody still has. That was number one in our poll. And then there is the need often to analyze and look across the various desktop machines. So I can't just analyze my network file shares. I need to also be able to run analytics against my user devices, that I've issued out to my employees. A lot of companies now are using tools like G Suite, right? They're using Google Drive and Gmail as an alternative. So, and then, also platforms like Box are out there, right? So there's a lot of different options where content can be. And so how do we do a comprehensive analytics across all of these data sources without having to do something different for everyone? And how do we do it consistently on a continual basis? And that's really the goal here is we need to discover information. So we need to go out and we need to find the various data sources that are out there that we want to analyze, number one. And then we need to look at those data sources and figure out what are the individual targets. So if I go look at OneDrive, how many different OneDrive locations do I have? If I go look at email, Exchange Online, how many different mailboxes do I have that I need to analyze? So I need to discover the available data sources and targets. Then I need to run analytics against those. I need to create analytic workflows that will go out and find the information that I'm looking for. And I may need to have different workflows to look for different types of information and different workflows for different types of data sources. Then I want to inspect that information, see if it contains information like PII data or personal health information. And then I may want to classify it so that I can put retention on it, put it under records management control, ultimately dispose of it, or just know what's out there so I can respond to requests for information, right? That's kind of where we need to get to. And there are different varieties for doing what we call file analytics, right? Because that's what I'm going to do. When I look at any of these systems, when it all boils down, it's a file we're going to open up and look at and analyze. Can be a database information, right? But typically, this is the type of analytics we want to do. We're going to look at properties of the information. When was the file created? Is it over 3 years old? Right, that may be one criteria we care about. That's going to filter out a lot of newer data. When was it last accessed? If nobody's touched it for 12 months and it's sitting in OneDrive or it's sitting in a SharePoint site, maybe I want to make a decision on what to do with it. Or maybe Dean recently left the company, so we need to go out and find every file on the network file share that's owned by Dean so we can see what's out there and make a decision what to do with it and who to assign it to. Or if it's in a certain path, right? Maybe I want to run different analytics against different network file shares in my company because different shares hold different information. Or maybe I want to start doing things like string searches. I want to go out and look and find documents that may reference things like HIPAA, COBRA, medical claims. That probably is an employee medical record or contains private health information. Does it contain FOB, payment terms, ship to, billing address? Those might be invoices or purchase orders, right? And I can make a decision on what to do with those. Or does it contain things like credit card names? Or maybe we want to do pattern matching and look for not just credit card names, but credit card numbers. Or we want to look for social security numbers, phone numbers, or certain patterns, right? Using regular expressions, we can start to look for patterns and we can deal with variations in the pattern. So there's a lot of information out on the web about using regular expressions. And, simple example, in the United States, a Social Security number has a format of 3 numbers, 2 numbers, 4 numbers. That's the standard format. You can think of a passport number similarly or a tax ID number. Different countries have their own patterns. But I can create an expression now that can handle the standard format, which would have dashes in between each group of numbers, or the way some people write it out, no dashes, no spaces, or no dashes, but spaces instead. or phone numbers with dashes, or phone numbers with parentheses, or all the different permutations you can run into, right? When you start using regular expressions and pattern matching, the power that you have to look for information becomes very powerful. And then I can begin to combine all of these things together using Boolean expressions. Go look at every file that's over 3 years old and see if there's a pattern in there that matches an employee ID, right? I need to find both of those things. Or go look for any document that contains the term cardiac near arrest. We don't want arrest records. We want things related to heart attacks, right? So those two words need to be near one another or next to one another. So you can start to use Boolean expressions and group things together and use ands and ors and create very complex searches if you need to. And sometimes I just want to ignore certain data sources. As I'm looking through a file share, whether it's a network file share or whether it's individual desktop machines, I probably don't need to analyze the C:\Windows directory. There shouldn't be information in there. Or I want to ignore files like DLL files or log files or temp files. Right? I can exclude certain things so that if I'm actually going through and searching literally terabytes of information, that can speed my search up pretty significantly if I can carve out and ignore 10%, 15% of the information that's out there because it's not relevant. Or if I'm in SharePoint, right, or other data sources, they all have unique data structures. In SharePoint, I have certain list names that are storing SharePoint-specific information. I don't care about searching the site pages library. And I can start to do source-specific types of searches. Hey, if it's email, well, now I have properties like the sender's name. Who was it sent to? Were there BCC or CC included people? What was the subject? Does the subject contain a certain pattern, right, or term? Or if it's in SharePoint, I only care about site names that have the word project in them. Or I only want to look for content and analyze content of certain content types. Right? You can start to get very specific about what you're looking for based on the data source. And once I've begun to do these analytics, now I have visibility into the information and I can take action on that information. So as I find documents, if I find information that contains PII data or personal health information, maybe I want to move a copy for now into a file share that only HR has access to so that I can have my HR representative take a look at it and determine, should this be out there? Why is it out there? Did somebody violate company policy? What's going on? Or I can actually just move things. Oh, I found this over here. I want to move that to a new location that now maybe is under records management control or that's more secure, right? Or I found documents that reference unreleased products or trade secrets. Those should be in a secure area. Or really big files, right? Start to think of things like multimedia files, videos, and other things, right? Maybe I want to automatically compress those if they're over a certain size just to save space. Or I can take the most radical action and just simply delete things. If it's over 10 years old, hasn't been accessed in the last 18 months, delete it, right? I might want to do a test run first and generate a report to see what would be deleted so I can warn my users. Maybe I give them 14 days or 30 days to clean things up, then I do the deletion. But now we have the power to make intelligent decisions around that information. Or maybe I want to start to label my information. As I discover what information is, especially if I'm doing things like term searches, or we had an example of a client that said, I don't care if the document has a name in it, or I don't care if the document has a social security number in it. If it has both, now it's PII data. So maybe I want to look for those types of conditions and label the document as PII, or I want to look for terms that tell me this is an invoice or it's a contract. The document has force majeure in it somewhere. That's probably a contract, right? And if it is a contract, I'm going to label it as such. And now Gimmal Records Management can pick that label up, automatically classify the document based on what the document is versus just the properties, and assign it to the right record class, give it the right life cycle, and now put an expiration date where that document will be disposed of in a defensible fashion 6 years from now. And I can generate reports. Again, I know what's out there now, and I know what's in my different data sources. I can create reports, and I'll show you some examples of these. I can generate dashboards that are very visual in nature that I could share with non-technical users, and I can begin to do trend analysis over time. So I can see when I first run my analytics, as I broaden it out, I can see how the amount of data grows. As I begin to do cleanup, I can see it drop. If I run my trend analysis the next month and it spiked back up, I know something has changed, but I can begin to see patterns over time as to what I'm doing. And that's what Gimmal Altitude delivers, right? Altitude is an analytics product that allows me to connect to and analyze a variety of different data sources, run different types of analysis, generate those reports, and create classification labels on content. It gives me visibility into all of those unstructured data sources that we've talked about, allows me to find documents that contain business value or expose me to risk, and integrates with Gimmal Records Management on the back end so that I can choose to apply records management policy to information as it is discovered. And so what we're going to do now is just take a quick look into Altitude. We're not going to do a full demo, but we'll give you a quick look. And if you would like to see a demo, you'll be able to request that at the end of the webinar. So let me jump to the screen here. And you guys should be able to see my Altitude login now. So let's click the login screen. And this is the Altitude dashboard. It's a web-based application. When I first log in, what I see is the various data sources that I'm connected to. And if I want to click on that, it's going to show me that Altitude is analyzing my Exchange Web Services mailbox, so Exchange in the cloud, G Suite mailboxes, Google Drive in G Suite, OneDrive. I'm looking for PST files. I'm analyzing SharePoint, both on-prem and online, and Windows file shares. Right, so I'm analyzing multiple locations from one instance of Gimmal Altitude. And if I want to drill down, I mentioned it goes out and inspects that data source. So it looked at my file servers and my network file shares on my desktop machine and came back and said, there's 14 potential locations you can go run analytics against. So now it's not like go hit every file share out there and run analytics. That could be overwhelming. I can be very specific and very targeted in what I go run it against. Once I know what my sources are, I can go out and set up my data governance workflows. So different workflows can go through and analyze different types of data sources. Here's one that's looking for PST files. When it finds a PST file, it goes to the PST, processes the folders, gets down to the email messages, and then as it processes each message, it looks for an attachment. If there's no attachment, it looks at the message date. If the message was originated before, receive date was before January 1st, 2017, we have a positive hit. We write some information into a report, and that report is generated at the end of the after it's done analyzing all the individual PST files. And those reports can give me a lot of information about what was found. So here's the report that was generated by the workflow I showed you previously. I can see out here to the very right that there were 300 rows returned in that report of information found in PST files. And I configured the workflow to come back and tell me when was the email received, who was the sender, what was the sender's email, who was it sent to, what was the subject, and do I need to take any action on it or add a label to it, right? So I can come through here, I can scroll, I can filter. Maybe I only want to see emails that came from a certain individual. I could come in here and filter that view and say, you know what, I only want to see if it contains hello. Now I've filtered that list of 300 down to 6, and I can quickly see just the ones I care about. Right? Other reports, different reports for different data sources may show different information. Here's one I ran against my file share, right? I can come in here. Whoops, I clicked on the wrong one. Sorry about that. There we go. This one had over 387 rows, right? And so I can see things like the file name, the path that was returned, where the file's at. And if I do an inverse sort here, we can sort by any of the columns. I can see things like what test did I run that triggered positive? Social Security number and a person's name was found. And you can see for all of the different ones that were found, here's information like the text it found in the document that matched my pattern matching. This is what triggered a positive test. And guess what? We can even return the full text information. I've now got full visibility into what's out there. And if I want to classify my records, I can do that as, or classify documents as I analyze them for records management, I can do that. So now as I found those documents that contain names and social security numbers, I can add a PII label to them. As I found documents that contain certain contract related terms, I can tag those as contracts. Right, so you can create your own labels, any number of labels that may be company specific, industry specific, regulation specific, any combination, apply those, and now in the back end, Gimmal Records Management will pick those up and and generate and do the record classification and the retention for you. And then the last thing, again, we kind of showed this in the slides, but now I've got visibility. I know what I'm managing. I know where information is at. I can come in here and see all of my standardized reports. So now I can come in and maybe I want to see attachments by type. This shows me a quick pie chart. And as I hover over the pie for all my different files, I've got 67 document files, 72 media files out there, 12 attachments, and so forth. Right? So I can break down, these are all my different email attachments. It's broken it down by the type of attachment that it is. So with that, that's a brief view of Altitude. Whoops. And I'm going to go back now to the slide deck. And we'll wrap this up and we'll get to a lot of the questions that have been coming in the chat window and the Q&A window on the side. So we're going to ask a last poll here as we begin to get ready for the questions. If you would like to see a live demonstration of Gimmal Altitude, click yes. If you're not quite ready, just click not at this time and we can follow up with you down the road. But we can do a deeper dive. Typically, we'll take 30 to 45 minutes and really get into how Altitude can be configured, what you can do with the various workflows, the types of analytics that you can run, and go into a deep dive and let you ask as many questions as you like. Right, that's the best part about a live demo is all of the Q&A. And quite frankly, it's the best part about these webinars as well, because I always learn a thing or two about how people want to use the product and the type of problems that they're trying to solve.
Speaking of Q&A, we can go ahead and get started while the poll's tabulating,
Okay.
if you'd like, Dean. So I know we have just a couple minutes. I want to be courteous of time. Start with one in the chat. Is the Altitude dashboard separate from the Gimmal Records Management dashboard, or can it be integrated?
They're separate dashboards because they are separate products, and they may be used by completely separate audiences, right? So Altitude could be used by IT analyst. It could be used by a business analyst or a financial analyst. Whoever needs to be out there running analytics across kind of the data that's out there. Whereas the records management dashboard is really targeted in the Gimmal Records Management Interface at somebody who's involved in the records management function. So they're separate. It doesn't mean the data generated that can be reported on couldn't be combined to create quite frankly, some pretty cool dashboards.
Okay, and the next one is, I've completed an inventory of file share drives in my company, but since SharePoint, OneDrive and Teams allows users to create their own repository, I'm finding it difficult to track these. What's the best way to do so?
Yes, Microsoft has made it efficient and easy to generate site sprawl. You can, that would be one benefit that Altitude could provide. So you could say, step one, I'm going to connect to OneDrive. That's one of my data sources. The first step is to do a search, and you come back and tell me what are all the targets I can analyze in OneDrive. So how many individual OneDrive locations are there? Or go search my SharePoint farm or my SharePoint, my Microsoft tenant, and tell me how many sites that are out there underneath, let's say, a certain URL, right? Gimmal.microsoft.com/sites. Anything under that, tell me how many sites there are. Now you know what's out there, and that's a starting point to determine, what to run analytics against. So that's one answer, but there's probably different ways you could do that as well.
Great. The next one is, when you refer to analytics, you mentioned properties, strings, patterns, etc., but you did not mention NLP or AI. Please elaborate.
So Altitude today is doing, it's not leveraging AI. Microsoft has just announced and begun to release Cortex. So Gimmal will be embracing Cortex and leveraging that on a go-forward basis. But we kind of have to wait for things to be fully baked before we can start incorporating it into our products. So AI, NLP, for those that don't know, is natural language processing. So think of it as like a Google type search. Find me all the documents Shana created, that type of a search. You'll see those things begin to appear in our product roadmap going forward, but it's, we're waiting on the technology to mature as much as everyone else is at this point. So today it's just the various types of analytics I mentioned.
Has a couple more if we have time. What type of access to repositories does Altitude need to perform these searches?
It depends on the different data source, right? So with SharePoint, you provide credentials that will give it access to the sites you wanted to analyze. That might be the farm account. That might be an individual user account in your Microsoft 365 tenant, same thing. It depends on what data sources you want that we call them agents, that connector agent to be able to access. For email, it's setting up email credentials. For things like G Suite, it's setting up client secrets and data tokens. So it'll vary depending on the data source.
Hey, and then one in the chat window. Back to file analysis. Why use access date and not the date last modified? Access can be misleading.
It can be, and realistically, depending on what you're trying to do, you may do both. Because if it just depends on what you're trying to achieve. Some people want to see the date something was last viewed. That's other times, especially in other data sources, SharePoint last modified can be a very deceiving date because a lot of things can change that last modified date without a user ever touching the file. So I think it depends on your end goal and the data source that you're analyzing. The good thing is there are a number of different dates you can choose to use to run the analysis against, and you could do it against. You could do an A/B test, right? Run it against one with one, another one with last access, one with modified. Don't see what you get back. See how different the lists may be.
Great. And then let's see. We'll do one last one. There was a question, Dean, about. It looks like the chat and the Q&A had the same question. There are a bunch of questions coming in. I apologize. I'm having a little bit of a hard time tracking them, but it looks like we're at 5 minutes over anyways. What I'll do is for the questions that we left in the chat, we didn't get to answer, we'll go ahead and email you directly. I hate to leave people hanging on the types of questions that they're asking. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Some good chat questions in. If you can think of anything else that that you wanted to ask after the webinar, both of our email addresses are up on the screen. You can email Dean or myself directly, or Dean, if you flip it to the next screen, you can always go to our website or email us info@gimmal.com or www.gimmal.com. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar between 24 and 48 hours in the form of a thank you email. So once you get that thank you email, make sure to open it. You can view the recording right within that link. And we hope to see you guys on the next webinar. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.